This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
Good morning and welcome to Racing Across America for this Monday morning. We kick off another week. We kick off the week as we end the year. Next couple of days we'll bring a close to 2013. Over the course of the week we'll be talking with some of the guests about some of their personal highlights or lowlights from the racing year. Coming up on today's show, Mike Penna, Horse Racing Radio Network. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the stakes action from this past weekend with Mike, and again get some of his thoughts on notable moments or accomplishments, achievements, highlights, lowlights from 2013. We'll also talk with Frank Vespi, and he'll actually concentrate on some of the highlights of racing in the Mid-Atlantic region. Frank Vespi, of course, operates theracingbiz.com, and they concentrate on news from racing in that Mid-Atlantic region. We'll also take a look back at the two nice stakes races at Laurel this past Saturday with Frank. That'll all be coming up in a few minutes. In the meantime, some of the news over the past few days. Do want to remind people, there is a two-day carryover, and there is racing tomorrow at Aqueduct. They'll be racing, I believe, right through next Sunday. New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, the holiday racing at Aqueduct, and then they're going right through Sunday. And then I think the Monday racing starts this coming week too, for obviously not today, but I think it's next Monday that they kick into their new schedule where the Aqueduct will be going Mondays. I'll have to double check that, but if it's not this week, it's this coming Monday. It's certainly the following one. But I bring up Aqueduct tomorrow because there is a two-day Pick Six carryover of $93,000 at Aqueduct tomorrow. Just want to give you a heads up because the racing action is a little light today, so maybe you can between some of the races at the three thoroughbred tracks we have going this afternoon, you can get a head start on your handicapping for Aqueduct for tomorrow, because two-day carryover $93,000, as it is the last day of the year, it's a mandatory payout, so keep that in mind. Aqueduct tomorrow, $93,000 Pick Six carryover with a mandatory payout. Tampa Bay Downs news, Fernando de la Cruz, who is off to a blazing hot start at Tampa, will be on the sidelines. He sidelined for 4 weeks with a injury suffered in a spill in Friday's 9th race. Went to the hospital, and the examination revealed a fractured right wrist. So Fernando de la Cruz, again, just blazing hot at that Tampa meet. Will go to the sidelines now. Ronnie Allen was also racing pretty well. You would think he would benefit from the absence of De La Cruz. And Daniel Centino, who missed the beginning part of the meet. He was planning to ride the winner up in Maryland. I kind of speculated. I wondered how long he would last up in Maryland. It was only about a couple of weeks before he decided, I do pretty well down at Tampa, and the weather looks pretty good. But Daniel Centino down at Tampa, and has been for a week and a half, couple of weeks, I guess. And you would think he's taking maybe a little time to get back into, or maybe to get back into some of the barns he needs to get into. But you would think Centino, in the absence of De La Cruz, may benefit and start to get hot again too. We'll keep our eyes on things down there in Tampa Bay, at least as far as that jockey situation is concerned. Didn't mention this last week, but David Jacobson last week did tie the single season record for wins in New York, subsequently has broken it. There was an article in the Forum on Friday, I believe this article is from, that said Jacobson collects a record 160th winner. That put him at a brand new total. As I said, he had tied it last week. Now he is the sole leader of the sole record holder of single season wins at the New York Racing Association in a calendar year. David Jacobson, as of this article in the Racing Forum, 160 wins, but he added a couple over the weekend. He had two on yesterday, Sunday, so I believe he's sitting at 162 right now. David Jacobson, red hot, obviously, and if you've been following New York racing this year, no surprise. Jacobson, anytime there's a race and Jacobson's in it, you have to give his horses very, very close consideration. You've had to all year long, obviously, and it added up to a record-breaking year for Jacobsen, with still one more racing day left in New York. We'll see what he does there. Speaking of New York racing, didn't mention this last week, but it came out just at the end of last week. The Belmont Stakes has bumped up the purse for the Belmont, and the New York Racing Association has bumped up the purse for the Belmont Stakes. This comes on the heels of the Maryland Jockey Club announcing an increase for the Preakness. Triple Crown races now, Kentucky Derby at $2 million, the Preakness at $1.5 million, and the Belmont Stakes with a boost of $500,000, also at $1.5 million. So Belmont now comparable to the Preakness Stakes, and that's probably about right. I mean, that's probably about right given where they all are right now. I think you can make an argument maybe they all need to bump up a little bit, but at $2 million for the Kentucky Derby, then 1.5 for the Preakness and Belmont is probably about right, because the Kentucky Derby, the handle they get there, the attention that race gets, certainly warrants a little bit more of a purse. Just on a business standpoint, the Kentucky Derby can afford it. You don't get as much buzz or as big a handle at the Preakness. However, if the Derby winner wins the Preakness, the Belmont then becomes a big deal. But on those years where there are two separate winners, then the Belmont itself it's unfortunately almost an afterthought some years. But again, I think comparable, looking at the handle and looking at the attention the races get, that the Kentucky Derby is a little more than the other two probably makes sense. As I say, I think arguments could be made that you can bump them all up. My personal feeling is I'm perfectly happy where they are. I think, $2 million and 1.5 and 1.5. So you're sitting at a $5 million total for the 3-race series, and you win one of those races with a horse, the residual value of your horse goes up. So I'm perfectly happy with the purses the way they are, and spreading any money, any beneficial money coming out of handle and whatnot, spreading that around a little bit more and making the rest of the racing a little more interesting. I think these purses are fine. But you look at worldwide, you look at the Breeders' Cup, you look at Dubai, and I've heard the argument, and I don't have strong arguments against, but I've heard the arguments made. All 3 of the Triple Crown races should be bumped from where they are. But right now, again, Derby, $2 million, Preakness, 1.5, Belmont Stakes, 1.5 in 2014. We'll Take Charge. This was coming. We'll Take Charge, again, we'll be racing next year. They've talked about perhaps the Don being the first start. We'll keep our eyes open and see where We'll Take Charge does show up. But half of We'll Take Charge has been sold, and half of We'll Take Charge went to Three Chimneys Farm. They've got 50% interest. Owner Willis Horton retained 50%. Happy with that, in that he gets to continue racing his horse. That's exactly what he wanted to do. The horse will continue, as said, in 2014, will remain in the barn of D. Wayne Lucas. So we'll look forward to We'll Take Charge, who got so hot. Really, the light bulb seemed to turn on. Had the two wins earlier in the year at Oaklawn. Certainly those are nothing to sneeze at. But then the 3 Triple Crown races was disappointing there. Nice race in the Jim Dandy, but then the breakthrough in the Travers, Pennsylvania Derby, the near miss in the Breeders' Cup, and then the win over Game On Dude in the Clark wound up the season in a way that says We'll Take Charge is going to be a lot of fun to watch next year with the move into the handicap division. The 2 races this year against the older horses to end the year indicate that. So glad he's coming back, but you can certainly understand Willis Horton wanting to capitalize on what he's got already, so you can understand the 50% being sold. But it's going to be good to see a horse like that come back for at least the 4-year-old season. And I would think the 4-year-old season will be it, but we'll take advantage of that. Interesting story out of Australia. It's a story that's been bubbling around for a while. I just want to bring it up because, as I say, it's one of those racing-centric stories that certainly colorful, and the people involved in it now, but 20 years from now, people may look back and find it, just a colorful footnote to the industry. But in Australia, Racing Victoria, the authorities there, going to investigate the ownership of the $5 million colt named Jimmy, who died this past weekend. had been bitten by a spider, wound up with laminitis, and again was euthanized over the weekend. But this horse is notable. A, this was a half brother to the great Black Caviar, and B, was the most expensive colt ever sold at auction in Australia. $5 million colt. Jimmy hadn't been to the racetrack yet. But again, I bring this up because tied into this is a story that's been bubbling around in Australia for really the past, well, since this horse got sick. Horse was the impetus of it. But there is a racing partnership down there that had been called BC Thoroughbreds. $20 million, more than that, $200 million has gone missing, essentially. The owner or operator of this racing partnership is under investigation. There's just a lot of speculation and some shady dealings are seeming to come out. Where'd the money go? The owner of this said, gee, 195 million of that went with somebody to Dubai. The investigators went and tried to look this person up in Dubai and couldn't find any such person. And again, this $5 million half brother to Black Caviar, when that horse got sick, then the insurance companies were essentially looking and trying to figure out what's going to happen if the worst happens, which did over the weekend. And so they looked into the ownership. And once those investigations started, this $200 million partnership kind of came under scrutiny. And so there is much more to be come out of this. Part of the story that came out with the horse being euthanized over the weekend, though, was the insurance policy with at least one person indicating that he had paid $250,000 to have a piece of this $5 million colt and had paid $70,000 for insurance on the colt. Subsequently, investigators went and looked, and the ownership papers were never filed in the name of this partnership. These partners who had paid well over $300,000 for a piece in insurance were never named on the forms. And so it's become a mess with these people, as I say, now out over $300,000, and they're trying to figure out who the insurance money should go to, although it's already been paid to the auction house, because the auction house subsequently wasn't paid after this horse. As I say, it's an interesting story that's a little bit of a mess. I'll have more up on Equidaily a little bit later today on this, but it just, a lot of times we point to, hey, look over in Europe, look at Asia, look at Australia. Everything is hunky-dory over there as far as the racing industry. And like over here, it's an industry where a lot of money is involved. In any industry, and it's not just racing, any industry with a lot of money, there are some shady dealings, and they pop up all across the globe occasionally, and one of those is now popped up down in Australia. Do want to also mention, and I'll try to get this maybe on tomorrow's show. Sometime during the week, I'll show this race from last Friday down at Fairgrounds. 2-year-olds, obviously this time of year, we're paying attention to get a head start on the 3-year-old season. And there was a nice allowance event down at Fairgrounds on Friday. The winner was Gold Hawk for Steve Asmussen and Winchell Thoroughbreds. And I wanted to bring that one up because Gold Hawk was the winner on the same day that Tapiture won the Kentucky Jockey Club at Churchill Downs, November 30th. Tapiture wins for Winchell, and Steve Asmussen wins the Kentucky Jockey Club. And the very next race, it was a maiden special event, and Gold Hawk, debut winner for the same connections. And I thought, and I mentioned it on the show a couple of times in that following week, I thought Gold Hawk was going to be very interesting to keep our eyes on. Sure enough, in the second career start, optional allowance claimer, 1.70 miles down at Fairgrounds, Gold Hawk gets it done as the 2-to-1 favorite, wins by over 3 lengths. And Ricardo Santana, the jockey, was quoted as saying, horse is a very good horse. Took him back early to school him a little bit, to teach him to rate. And sure enough, if you look at the chart and watch the race, and again, we'll watch the race, gets him back, back in the back of the pack and makes a nice late run to get up there to win. So got some good education. But Ricardo also says the thing he really showed me was that he wants to go a lot longer. The race Friday was only 1.70 miles, but he was just drawing off on his own at the end. So again, Gold Hawk wins a nice allowance event down at Fairgrounds for Asmussen Winchell. And the article that I was just reading also made the interesting point Tapiture, again, who won that Kentucky Jockey Club, is also at the fairgrounds for Asmussen. So which direction the two horses, early in the season, you got a couple of nice 3-year-olds once the calendar changes in the middle of the week. You got a couple of nice 3-year-olds. You don't want to butt heads. So it'll be interesting to see which horse they put on the fairgrounds trail. And then it wouldn't shock me at all to see the other one perhaps go up and try the series up at Oaklawn. The article didn't say that. What the article says is they'll probably go in different directions because they have two very nice horses down at Fairgrounds now. They didn't mention Oaklawn, but it wouldn't shock me at all if that was the direction they went. So either Tapiture or Gold Hawk probably make that Fairgrounds series. The other one maybe up at Oaklawn. We'll keep our eyes on that. But again, sometime over the next couple of days, we'll watch that race. I thought it was off of the debut effort. I thought Gold Hawk would be interesting. Now off of this follow-up should be interesting as well. Have some year in review articles that have come out over the past few days that are kind of interesting. I'll post a bunch of those on Equidaily later today, and we'll comment on some of those either later this morning or as the week goes along. But interesting articles coming out of the Racing Forum, and Gary West, Bill Finley had some comments, Bob Ehalt, all as we're getting close to the end of the year. And it's interesting to see the top stories. I listed on Loose on the Lead yesterday some of my top stories, and there is a lot of similar thinking between myself and some of the posted articles, although some of them have brought up things I'd kind of forgotten about that certainly were interesting and noteworthy during the year. As noted, however, we'll also be talking with some of our guests here on the show about their highlights. One of those guests coming up, Mike Penna, Horse Racing Radio Network. We'll get some of his thoughts on the highlights, lowlights of 2013, the racing year. That'll be coming up right after this. We'll also take a look at some of the stakes action from the weekend with Mike. Coming up next, right after this break, it will be Mike Penna from the Horse Racing Radio Network. Stay tuned.
I'm Mark Cassano. Join me Saturday mornings at 10 for Down the Stretch. We'll inform, analyze, and welcome in the biggest names in racing. So join me Saturday mornings at 10 for Down the Stretch, right here on the OTB Television Network.
Here in upstate New York, no one provides bettors with more wagering options than Capital OTB. Our network of branch and easy bet locations stretches from the mid-Hudson Valley all the way to the Canadian border and west to central New York. So whether you need to place a bet, fund your Capital Bets account, or watch the next big race, all the action is just around the corner. A full list of our branch and easy bet locations can be found online at capitalotb.com. Capital OTB, the better and most convenient choice for wagering in upstate New York.
Wagering at CapitalOTBBet.com is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Capital Bet TV, the fastest and easiest online wagering experience where you can monitor 5 different tracks simultaneously. 2. Capital Bet Express. Its straightforward program layout and interactive handicapping information lets you build your wager quickly and efficiently. And 3. Capital Bet Pro, designed especially for the professional horse player. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Hey, race fans, head down to the all-new Clubhouse Racebook and get in the game. With live horse racing on more than 250 flat-screen TVs, state-of-the-art wagering terminals, fantastic food and drinks, an amazing Vegas-style atmosphere with seating for nearly 900 of your closest friends. Conveniently located at 711 Central Avenue, right off Exit 5 of I-90 in Albany, the Clubhouse Racebook is the better choice.
I'm Anthony Mormino. Join me weekdays at 9 for the Handicappers Report. We'll handicap the top tracks across the country and help you prepare for the day in racing. That's the Handicappers Report, weekdays at 9, only on the OTB TV network.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Monday morning. Monday morning means a regular visit from Mike Penna, Horse Racing Radio Network. Good morning, Mike.
Hey, Seth. Good morning. How you doing?
Pretty good. How about you? How was Christmas?
Christmas was great. Would have been a little better if the Kansas City Chiefs could have given me a present yesterday for my Pittsburgh Steelers, but wasn't meant to be, I guess.
Yeah, well, don't feel bad. I had given up on my Jets long ago. Although they were still, I guess until like 2 weeks ago, still mathematically they were in it. And we were conversing back and forth via email yesterday. And as I said to you, I said to Anthony Mormino earlier, they won about 5 more than I thought they'd win this year. So I can't complain about the Jets, I guess. They do it every year, and that's what got me. Beginning of the season, you thought, boy, they might be okay. And then every year they do it, every year. But so I can sympathize.
Yeah, and tip your hat to the Chiefs backups. They played their tail off yesterday, played a great game, and the Steelers made their bed, so that's what you get when you start 0-4, unfortunately.
Yeah, it definitely. It's tough to make a comeback like that. All right, Mike, let's shift over to the horse racing conversation. I want to kick that off by typically we go back and look at what you've done over the past week on Horse Racing Radio Network. Just give people a heads up if they want to pull up some archive. And I haven't had a chance to listen to the interview yet. I certainly want to. You talked to Damon Thayer, legislator down in Kentucky. And the casino issue has bubbled back up down there in Kentucky. Did he give you any interesting info?
Yeah, it's a very insightful interview. When you read between the lines and listen to Damon during that interview, it doesn't sound like he's overly optimistic that this is actually going to go through again this year. Keep in mind, Kentucky has been trying to get casino gaming onto the ballot and let the public vote on the issue for several years now, and it just can't get the necessary votes to get through. I'm not 100% convinced after listening to that interview that they're going to have the votes to get it on the ballot for the fall of 2014, but that's what they're hoping for. They want to get it on the ballot as a constitutional amendment and let the public vote on it and determine whether we're going to have full-blown casino gaming here in the state of Kentucky. And it's something that really has become a necessary evil now in terms of keeping up with the states that do have it. You're at a serious disadvantage when you don't have casino gaming in your state. And Kentucky, the horse capital of the world, is really feeling that crunch on the racetrack.
Yeah, and you put it well, necessary evil, because I personally am not a big fan of that. I don't have big moral arguments against it. I think, great, Las Vegas is out there and Atlantic City and maybe a casino here or there. But, the slots at racetracks, I'm not a big fan, but as you say, given the situation, it's the have and the have-nots, and just the racing industry at this point in time kind of needs that to be a player. And so to have a major player on the racing scene like Kentucky be one of the have-nots, it certainly is not a good thing, I don't think, for Kentucky, but for the racing game in general. So we'll see what happens. And I've been looking at this issue now for the past couple of years as they've been chasing things. And well, it's politics, and we have it up here in New York in spades, so certainly it's no surprise. But you would think, what's wrong with letting the voters decide? What's wrong with putting it on the ballot? Let's just put it up for a vote and see what people want to do.
Yeah, and I'm in your camp as well. I've never been a huge fan of racing using casino gaming as a subsidy for the sport, and that's, let's face it, that's basically what it is. No matter what side you fall on, you call it a spade a spade. But, when you look at the efforts that some of the racetracks have made in recent years in marketing the sport, and that's a situation where we could go on for another hour talking about that. Has racing done a good job of promoting itself and marketing itself? And I say they've done an absolutely dismal job. But when you look at what Gulfstream, and let's take Santa Anita as an example, they attract 30,000 on opening day, the day after Christmas, for a great card that they put together. And like Mike Willman told me on the show this past week, the director of publicity at Santa Anita, he said that number was not inflated. It was a completely accurate number, and he credited the marketing campaign that they did over the past month or so for generating that type of interest in opening day and having 30,000 people on hand. So I think it speaks to the marketing efforts of the sport. If you promote it, if you put together a good product, people will support racing and they will come out to the racetrack.
Yeah, definitely. And that ties into the casino and the racino and the slots money in that hopefully racetracks are paying attention and using that slots money to market the sport, because we've looked around at some of the other the one that comes to mind is Ontario. That slots money might not be there forever, so let's make the most of it while we have it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Speaking of Santa Anita, let's kick things off with the stakes review action. Going back to last Thursday, opening day, let's watch the Malibu Grade 1 event. 3-year-olds going 7 furlongs. Going to be an upset in here. The number 2, Shaking It Up, is going to get it done at 17-1. Number 7, Central Banker, is going to run second at 10-1. The 9-5 favorite, the number 4, Flashback, will disappoint, running 4th after some trouble at the beginning. But Shaking Up gets it done. Notable under David Flores, and I've said the past couple of days, I'm scratching my head why this guy is leaving Fairgrounds and the comfort of being tied in with Steve Asmussen to head to Singapore. But if you're going to leave, this is a pretty good way to get out of the country.
Yeah, I think it is. And when you look at Shaking It Up, and we'll go ahead and call him the other Baffert in here because he was probably the least regarded of any of the Baffert entrants in the Malibu. Here's a horse that loves Santa Anita, and again, hindsight is 20/20. But he was 2 for 3 at Santa Anita, and he had run very well at this particular distance in the past. He won the Grade 2 San Vicente Stakes back in February, going 7/8 of a mile at Santa Anita. So he had some credibility, and I think the fact that he got off at such a big price really speaks to the competitive nature and the contentiousness of this year's Malibu. I thought it was a very deep race. Flashback certainly figured to be the one to beat on paper, but he got off to a slow beginning, kind of got taken out of his game. I thought he ran very well considering the trouble he had at the start, but Shaking It Up had the great trip under David Flores, and really, with that back class, was able to get it done.
Yeah, and impressive there. And as I said, we talked a little bit about some of the stakes action over the past few days on the network. And as I said, the jockeys in those Grade 1s on opening day were both the stories. David Flores, again, on the move to Singapore. And then the other Grade 1, the La Brea, Gary Stevens gets it done on the comeback year. And we talked a little bit about this, Loose on the Lead, the show I do on Sundays with Steve Bick. He's been making the case for Gary Stevens for an Eclipse for maybe 3 or 4 weeks now. I read Jenny Reese's Eclipse ballot, which she published in the Courier Journal. She's got Gary Stevens on top. I'll be interested to see, because I think most voters are just going to look at those raw numbers of Castellano. And if I had a vote, I'd go in his direction. But it's kind of interesting. Gary Stevens getting a little Eclipse buzz.
Yeah, I think Gary Stevens falls into the same category as Mike Smith this year. Gary Stevens, of course, going to get a lot of credit for making the comeback and doing what he's done, coming back off the shelf, so to speak, off of that long layoff. And it is truly remarkable, and he is very deserving of Eclipse votes. I think he falls into the same category as Mike Smith because Mike had a tremendous year as well. Didn't win the number of races that a guy like Javier Castellano was able to put together, or even Joel Rosario for that matter. But Mike Smith won the right races, and he won a lot of big races, much like Gary Stevens did.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, Jenny Reese had it. Gary Stevens on top, Mike Smith second, and Castellano third. But I think the raw numbers on Castellano, I mean, he's number one with wins, number ones with money, and comfortably in both categories. I think the voters will tilt in his direction, but it'll be fun to see how many votes Gary Stevens does get. All right, Mike, let's shift our attention now down to Florida. We'll watch the McKnight Handicap. It was scheduled for 1.5 miles on the turf. With the weather down there, they kicked things over to the dirt track, but I wanted to pull this one up because the number 9 Twilight Eclipse is going to get it done for our friends at West Point Thoroughbreds. And it's just one of those cases where I think you have, and I say this, turf sprinting, I think, is a specialist kind of racing. So I look for, in turf sprints, I look for horses that have been successful sprinting on turf. Well, I think once you get to these marathon distances, I think there are specialists there too, and Twilight Eclipse has proven to be a specialist at the marathon distances in the past, and with the switch to the main track at Calder on Saturday, still was able to get up and run very well on the dirt because I think he's just benefits from the distance. Set up some nice fractions. He was on the front end the whole way. 26, 53, 119. Going to be tough to reel him in after that.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only was he too good for this field on the dirt, but certainly his class prevailed. He was just far too classy for this group. I think even if it stayed on the grass, he was going to be far too classy. He exited 5 consecutive Grade 1 races, and when he's running against horses like Magician and Little Mike and Big Blue Kitten in his previous 3 outings, there weren't any of those horses in the McKnight, and he figured to be very tough, whether it was on turf or on dirt. It didn't matter. And he went off as the 1-2 favorite, and not only because of those Grade 1 races that he was coming out of, but because his lone dirt try in his 13-race career, now 14-race career, was in the Temperance Hill at Belmont on October of 2012, October 21st, and he finished third that day. He was only beaten a length, so he proved that the surface shouldn't have been an issue, and it wasn't. I loved it that he broke sharp. Jose Lezcano just let him do his thing. He didn't try to take him back. He let him go out there. You mentioned the soft fractions, and when you let a class horse like this get away with those kind of fractions, I don't care what the surface is, it's going to be over, and this is a really, really cool horse.
Yeah, and I was The West Point people, typically up at Saratoga, there's that big screen in the bottom floor of the clubhouse, and a lot of them will stand there. Terry Finley oftentimes will be there, and Tommy Bellhouse will be there, along with the West Point people. And sure enough, a big group of them on Sword Dancer Day were there. And about mid-stretch, they were really a happy bunch as Twilight Eclipse took the lead mid-stretch of the Sword Dancer. Unfortunately, that day, the Ramsey Juggernaut just caught up to him. As you say, Big Blue Kitten beat him that day in the Sword Dancer, but a good second in a Grade 1 event. So as you say, there was certainly some class there to take this one to the winner's circle on Saturday. And speaking of soft fractions, I wanted to pick up across town the turf race that went on the turf. Had Ron Nicolani on with me on Friday, and Ron said the El Prado, strong enough field, probably deserved a grade. I have no arguments with that. The El Prado, $100,000 going a mile on the turf. We'll watch the number 1, Mr. Online, get it done under Kendrick Carmouche. Going to pick it up on the backstretch, Mike, and I'll tell the viewers, watch the fractions as they come up, because this is just another example to me of I want to shoot myself when this kind of thing happens. 25, 50, 114. Now, in this particular race, I might give the jockeys a little bit of a pass in that this horse had been sprinting. Maybe they thought he'd come back to the field. But on those fractions going a mile, how does somebody not get up and challenge Mr. Online?
Yeah, especially with a horse that had won 4 of 8 at the 1 mile distance. So it wasn't like Mr. Online couldn't get the distance and carry his speed that far. He had shown he could do it in the past. And it was no surprise to see him on the lead coming out of those 4 consecutive sprint races. You expected him to be up close or even on the pace. But when he did set that 25 opening quarter, my eyes just lit up, and I said, you have to be kidding me. Yeah. And then 50 and 1/5 for the half, you kind of felt like it was going to be very difficult to catch him. And tip your hat to Salto, the favorite, who ran a big race under Javier Castellano to get up for second. It wasn't like he had a horrible trip by any means, but he was more of a victim of that pace. Mr. Online just never came back because of the soft fractions, and Salto ran a big race to almost catch him at the wire. One more jump, and Salto's probably the winner. So the wire arrived in just in a nick of time for Mr. Online.
Yeah, as you say, Salto made a good move. We just watched him come under the wire and got up there. But with those fractions, just too much left in the stretch. And boy, I find that very frustrating. We had Richard Migliori on with us, 3 weeks or so ago. And he contends that jockeys today just don't learn the, there isn't the clock in the head that he had. He said, in the morning he'd get sent out to work horses, and you came back and you worked the horse couple of fifths off what the trainer wanted. He let you know about it. And he said the jocks today just don't seem to get that same kind of schooling. And certainly, you see it happen all the time, these soft fractions, and you're yelling at your computer screen, somebody go up and challenge, and it just doesn't happen. But hats off to Kendrick Carmouche. On the flip side, the jockey that goes out and does it, you have to give him all the credit. Mike, let's shift attention now. I'm going to ask all the guests this week. We are wrapping up 2013 midweek, so I want to get some thoughts. I talked a little bit about some of my highlights on yesterday's show. I thought things like Maryland and the 10-year agreement, which came out really at the tail end of last year, but I think we saw a little bit of a resurgence in Maryland this year. So there was the uniform medication rules. The news, racing news, I thought had some nice stories. Personalities like the aforementioned Gary Stevens were interesting. And then on the horse side, I thought, although the 3-year-old division didn't get defined necessarily until Will Take Charge did something right at the end of the year, I thought the 3-year-old division was entertaining all year long. Give us some of your 2013 racing highlights.
Yeah, mine were a little bit more personal, I think. When I look back on the year, and it was great when you sent me the email and said, hey, I'm going to ask you for a few of your top moments, because it really made me sit down and think about the moments that stood out to me. And these are in no particular order, but one that was certainly memorable was not only because of the horse, but because of the connections, and that was Orb winning the Derby and giving Shug McGaughey his first Kentucky Derby victory. And I think it even goes beyond that, because I was able to sit down and talk with Shug in the days leading up to the Derby. We produced a vignette on Shug and on his quest to get that Derby victory for our national coverage. And Shug took the time, with everything else that he had going on and all the demands that he had placed on him to be in different places and do different interviews and whatever it might be, he took the time to sit down with me one-on-one in his barn at Churchill Downs for an interview so that we could talk about his career and what this victory would mean to him if he was able to pull it off. So that, to me, is a very memorable moment when I look back on the year. Another one involves Groupie Doll and the human connections surrounding Groupie Doll with trainer Buff Bradley, who I've gotten to know very well in recent years. His dad, Fred, now 82 and has had some health issues. And to watch her come down the stretch and win the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint and defend her title there was great. But then watching her sell at Keeneland in November for $3.1 million is a moment that I'm not going to forget. I had the opportunity to go out and see her at the barn, visit with Buff, visit with his dad before she came into the sales ring, and just the raw emotion. And, you know, there's that movie with Kevin Costner, For Love of the Game. This is for love of the horse, and that's what this sport is really all about. So many times in the sport of thoroughbred racing that gets overlooked. So many people in the sport do what they do simply because of the love of the animal, the love of the horse. And that's what this was all about. And I was able to stand there with the connections, with Buff's family, and watch as the numbers kept going up when she was in the ring. And it got to 1 million, and everybody cheered. And it got to 2 million, and everybody cheered. And then to see it get to 3.1 million, I think was something that most people didn't think was going to happen. And to be with the connections at the time, that was a really cool moment for me.
Yeah, and I can, as you're explaining that, I can imagine sitting there. You know, how many times are you going to get choked up in a horse auction? But I could see it happening, and that because of those connections and the story there. And then she comes back for the new connections, and I thought ran a bang-up race in the Cigar Mile despite having some trouble. So Groupie Doll, certainly a nice story. And Orb, I think that's going to be on a lot of people's list. The nice old-school connections winning the Kentucky Derby. Certainly, you know, Shug McGahee and the Phipps family. Certainly that'll, as I say, get included on some lists. Mike, before we let you go, 2013 wraps up another year for the Horse Racing Radio Network. Why don't you just give us some of your thoughts? You started the Horse Racing Radio Network with your partner years back. It's grown into something special. Just tell us a little bit about what 2013 meant to Horse Racing Radio Network.
Yeah, it was an incredible year for us. Our partnership with SiriusXM really helped expand the exposure of the network and let more people be able to tune into what we're doing. We expanded with a few different shows throughout the week. We now provide coverage from 3 to 7 Eastern Time every Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday afternoon. As you know, Seth, we started some new shows with Trainer Talk and our Weekend Stakes preview on Friday afternoons, and then our call-in shows, which have just been amazing to be able to provide a forum to listeners and allow them to call in and talk about the sport every week. We really enjoy doing that and somewhat giving back to the racing public. And, you know, of course, our race broadcasts are always a lot of fun. To be there on site for all the big races is incredible, and can't thank all the racetracks enough, all the connections at the tracks, every trainer, every jockey, every owner who took the time to talk with us and do interviews with us this year. It's been a remarkable run, and we're looking for bigger and better things in 2014.
Yeah, you guys do a great job, so we're happy to tout some of the archives to people. And also, as you say, if you go to the HRRN website, you can find what's coming up as well, so folks can listen live also. Mike, as always, appreciate the visit. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you next Monday.
Thanks, Seth. Appreciate it. Happy New Year to you and to all your viewers.
All right. Mike Penna from the Horse Racing Radio Network. Again, if you type in Horse Racing Radio Network on Google, you can find their website. All the information is there on upcoming broadcasts. There's archives. You can go back and listen. Those Trainer Talk shows are very, very fun. All right. We'll take our next break. When we come back, Frank Vespi of TheRacingBiz.com. Take a look at a couple of Laurel Stakes races from this past weekend, and we'll get some 2013's thoughts from Frank on Mid-Atlantic racing this past year. Stay tuned.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night School, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night School in the Buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
Each morning on the OTB TV network, you get the very best in horse racing programming. Weekdays begin with the Handicappers Report, where professional handicappers share their selections and analysis of the day's racing. Followed by Racing Across America, a daily conversation with racing personalities from around the country. Saturdays include Down the Stretch, where Mark Casano speaks with the biggest names in racing. And Sunday mornings, it's Loose on the Lead, where Steve Bick and I offer news and a unique lineup of weekly guests. All here on the OTB TV network.
Funding your Capital OTB bet account is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Easy Money. Clearly the fastest and easiest method of depositing funds into your account. Make deposits or withdrawals in just minutes. 2. Green Dot Money Pack. Gives you instant access to your funds. Green Dot Money Packs are available at thousands of retailers nationwide. And 3. MasterCard Visa. Simply click on the link from the funding page, enter your account information, and fund your account. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today. Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to CapitalOTB.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. CapitalOTB.com. Log on today.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. As promised before the break, joined now by Frank Vespi of TheRacingBiz.com. Good morning, Frank.
Hey, Seth. How are you?
Very good. How was your Christmas?
It was fantastic, thanks. How about yours?
Very good. Yeah, no complaints. We the weather just the week, last weekend before Christmas warmed up a little bit here, but Christmas Day it was temperatures that were suitable for Christmas, and now this next week we're supposed to get down into frigid temperatures. So I enjoyed the little break we had leading into Christmas, the little weather break. But now it looks like winter has hit. So.
Well, it was spoken like a true upstate New York guy. Temperature suitable for Christmas. I like it.
Yeah, that's right. Although I said, I think I was talking to Ron Nicoletti from Gulfstream, because a couple of weeks ago he was talking about how warm it was and Christmas was coming up. And I said, my father for years and years was retired and would spend the winter down in the Tampa area. And so one year I went down to spend Christmas. And the first time I did that, subsequently I did it a bunch of times. First time I did, I thought, what's Christmas going to be like without snow? It just doesn't seem. But boy, you get down there, you're laying on the beach Christmas Day. It's fun. You have a turkey sandwich and slop on some suntan lotion. It doesn't bother you at all, believe me.
It seems like you could overcome the lack of snow, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, Frank, as noted, your website, TheRacingBiz.com, you guys do a great job covering racing news, the events, everything, the personalities, all the news from the Mid-Atlantic region. So I wanted to touch base with you, as this week we're getting some thoughts on 2013 in review. So I thought we'd go back and look at some of the highlights in that 2013 season in the Mid-Atlantic. We'll do that in just a moment. First, though, I want to go just back to this past weekend down at Laurel. A couple of nice stakes races down there on Saturday. First up, the Willa on the Move. This is a 6-furlong event, $100,000 purse for fillies and mares, 3-year-olds and up. We're going to watch the stretch run and see number 1, She's Ordained, get it done at 3-1. Also at 3-1 was the favorite, Lady Sibilia, who winds up running third in here, the number 8 horse. But a pretty convincing victory for She's Ordained. Although I say that, 5-star Mama comes up late, and actually, She's Ordained will come up late and get that. I'm looking at the chart here, and it looks like we're. Do we have the? Oh, we got. Yeah, we're not watching the right race here. I wonder if I sent in the wrong info. Well, we'll let you describe the race, because we just showed a. Oh, I think maybe we just showed the. Yeah, we showed the juvenile. That's what we flip-flop. So why don't we talk about the juvenile first? The juvenile, we just watched Joint Custody get it done, the number 4 horse. And Joint Custody went off as a 30-cent to $1 favorite in there. And not surprising, this is a pretty nice little 2-year-old. This is a horse coming into the race, 3 victories in 5 starts, including the Marylander last time out. All of that led up to that 30-cent to the $1 favoritism. And Joint Custody wins off pretty convincingly, as we saw. So I think, again, this is a pretty nice 2-year-old coming out of the Maryland circuit.
Yeah, it sure is. And this is a race that had, on paper, looked like it was going to be a pretty interesting race, because you had Joint Custody, who, has really done nothing wrong so far and was coming off a nice win in his prior race in the Marylander. And then you had another horse named It's a Bang, as a horse that Donnie Barr trains, who had won the Maryland Million Juvenile, and then had come in third, but beat less than a length in the James Lewis, and had finished ahead of joint custody both times. But unfortunately, the bank scratched out the morning of the race, and that pretty much left it to Jerry Robb and joint custody. And you know, he did what he needed to do. He won off like a good horse against some overmatched animals, and they think he's going to stretch out. Although Jerry is concerned because the horse apparently doesn't much like to work in the morning. So he runs like he's going to go farther, but he's a little concerned that he's never going to work hard enough to get the conditioning in him. But he's a legitimate horse. He's legitimately competitive in open company. He thrashed an open field in the Marylander. It'll be fun to see what they do with him. I mean, he seems like he can do some good things, and it'll be fun to see how that develops.
Yeah, we'll have to keep our eyes on that one because it is the time of year when you're looking at the 2-year-olds and anticipating the calendar page changing, they're becoming 3-year-olds. But again, this is one so far as a 2-year-old has done pretty well, now strung a couple of stakes victories together. All right, I'm told now we do have the Will on the Move racked up, so we'll watch that one. And again, this is Fillies and Mares 3-year-olds and up going 6 furlongs, and it will be She's Ordained, who will come on late to win as the 3-to-1 second choice. Again, the favorite is going to run third in here. 5-Star Mama, the number 5 horse, 4-to-1, takes the lead or has the lead and will get run down in the lane. But She's Ordained, again, this is a horse, 29 career starts coming into this event, 13 wins. This is one of those horses you'd love to own.
Yeah, well, and the great thing about her story is she was acclaimed. You know, Tim Kreiser claimed her for $7,500, and you know she's now won over $215,000 this year. So they really hit the jackpot with this horse. I talked to him after the race, and I said, "Did you have any idea you were getting this when you claimed her?" And he said, "No, we like to claim horses that still have their first allowance condition open, and that's what we saw with her. And we thought we might be able to win one allowance race with her." And she's turned around and won a stake here, was second in a stake in her prior start, was third in a stake a couple races before that. And she's turned into a really nice filly here, and she gets a good run here in her last race against 5-Star Mama. She had broken poorly and then spent the rest of the race trying to make that ground up and didn't quite get it done. This time she broke fine and had plenty to get there in the end. The horse that to me was a little bit of a disappointment here was Lady Sibelia, who came in third. She had won a couple of races really nicely earlier this year when just sort of getting back into it after being away for a while, and had kind of a rough trip in her last start and came in second. And this one, she really looked like she had every chance at the head of the lane and never could get by 5-Star Mama and then ended up in third. So she's a little bit of a disappointment the way she ran, but take nothing away from She's Ordained, who has come in a year from being a $7,500 claiming horse to a really nice filly.
Yeah, and you love those stories of claimers. I mean, Cassia Electronica was one of the all-time greats, the Pletcher horse. Lava Man, one of the all-time greats. Now, you're not going to get one of those all the time, but as you say, you pick up one for $7,500 and do what this one does. And I'm looking down the past performances, and it's funny. It's kind of they're going back and forth. Stakes race, starter allowance. Stakes race, starter. And that when you claim a horse cheaply like that, those starter allowances are out there calling for you. The condition book is kind of flying at you with those starter allowances.
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously make a whole lot of money running in starters. We saw that sort of most famously with the horse that won 20 in a row, Rapid Redux.
Yeah.
And these guys have made pretty good use of this, but you give them credit too because they have, they used up a whole bunch of allowance conditions. She's won through a 3 other than. They've run in these starters, but they've also taken now, it looks like 4 stake shots with her, and she just keeps answering the bell. Here's a random sort of fun trivia note is this stake was the Willa on the Move. There are actually 2 Maryland-bred graded stakes winners from the past named Willa on the Move, bred by the same guy.
Oh, that's interesting. Is there a rule on how far apart they have to be with the name?
You know, that's a good question. I don't actually have the answer. They were, I want to say they were less than 15 years apart. You know, one was in the mid-'80s and one was in the late '90s.
That's interesting. I'm vaguely certain there is, but I'm not sure. But I would guess it's less than the 15 years then, which makes sense. Maybe a 10-year gap probably makes sense. Yeah, that there is a good bar trivia question. Of course, I think it only works. You're only going to get challenged in places like Saratoga or Lexington, something like that. I think you have to have a bar full of horse people to toss that one out, but it'll be a good one. I'll use it this summer sometime up at Saratoga. All right, Frank. As noted, we do want to take a look at some of the 2013 year in review highlights from the Mid-Atlantic region. Again, that's what you cover with the RacingBiz.com. First up, obviously, any racing jurisdiction. I wish it was different. I wish the older horses got a little more attention, but it is what it is, and we'll take what we can get in the racing game. The 3-year-olds get so much attention, particularly around Triple Crown time. So one of the highlights certainly down in Maryland was at Pimlico, middle of May, the Preakness. We're going to watch Oxbow win here. And Frank, when I talked about my highlights yesterday on the show, I said, I thought the 3-year-old season, the 3-year-olds didn't define themselves till the end when Will Take Charge finally jumped to the forefront. But I thought they were entertaining all year long. And as we watch the stretch run to the Preakness, we'll see number 6, Oxbow, get it done. And this was part of what made that 3-year-old season so much fun. Not only Oxbow, but the human connections as well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And you know, Oxbow, I felt for a while that Oxbow was a little bit of an underrated horse. I mean, people kind of tended to dismiss his efforts, including to some extent this one. You know, he got a pretty easy trip up front, and et cetera, et cetera. But the horse ran great, I thought, in the Kentucky Derby. He was part of that pace, and he stuck around almost to the very end, which nobody else on the pace did. And then here he has it his own way and wins pretty easily. And I mean, it's just such a great story. I mean, Wayne Lucas's career has been left for dead, you know, for 5 years or more, and all of a sudden he's back with a horse like this, and then getting better as the year goes on. And then Stevens' career was literally dead. I mean, he had retired and he was acting, and now he's back winning the Preakness, and it was a neat story to be around. And it's, you know, everybody loves having Lucas involved because he's such a character, and because he'll say the things that nobody else will say. So for him to get back to the top of the mountain, it just made this a very cool story. And it wasn't the most exciting race because it was pretty much Oxbow all the way around the track, but it was just such a great story, and so much, as you said, about the human connections here.
Yeah, and as I said, I thought that 3-year-old division this year was a lot of fun, and a lot of it was the human connections. We talked just prior to you with Mike Penna, and he thought Orb was one of the top stories, winning the Derby. And again, a lot of that was the connections. McGahee, Phipps, Old School. So Oxbow certainly fits in that camp. Another story that is as much the connections as the horse. You mentioned Dance to Bristol, and that's a horse that's very familiar to us up here at Saratoga. And in fact, we are going to watch the Grade 1 ballerina, Dance to Bristol, getting it done under Xavier Perez. Ollie Figgins is the trainer. This was a horse that was based in Maryland, but one of those horses that was then able to branch out. What comes to mind is Extra Heat to me, a horse that then was able to branch out and beat the best of open company. You win a Grade 1 up at the Saratoga. Certainly that's a feather in any horseman's cap. So Ollie Figgins, tip of the cap to him. Xavier Perez, who of course was so in the news with the viral video of Spicer Cub earlier this year, but then validates it with a nice Grade 1 victory. But again, Dance to Bristol, a fun story coming out of the Maryland region this year.
Yeah, I mean, that was really neat, and it was a little bit of a regional story, too. You know, Ollie Figgins, is the sort of bulk of his barn is at Charlestown. He's got a smaller string at Bowie, which is where Dance to Bristol was, and, you know, and Bowie is a training center. It used to be a racetrack, and it's not long for this world. I mean, within a year, you probably won't have Bowie anymore. And it's sort of a little bit of a, it's in pretty ragged condition. But horsemen there love the racing strip, and they really like how quiet it is there. It doesn't have all the hustle and bustle of a racetrack or a city or anything. So they like how quiet it is, and they think the horses really like it. And certainly Dance to Bristol thrived there, and then went up to New York. She won three straight graded races in New York, finishing with the Ballerina. It just made a really nice story, and you talk to people around Bowie, and they're all rooting for her. She's like the home team, and she's carrying Bowie's banner into battle, and against the best horses in the country, and for her to put together that run was really exciting for people, and it just. The connections are nice people. The Wances who own the horse. Susan Wantz she loves horses. She loves this horse. When they had the retirement ceremony for the horse, there were a lot of people sniffing back tears, and it was a fun story. It was too bad that it sort of came to an end, not the way you'd hoped in the Breeders' Cup, But for folks like this to, pay $40,000 for a horse and end up in the Breeders' Cup with a very logical contender it's one of the neat things about racing, and one of the things that's really fun.
Yeah, and again, you win a Grade 1 up at Saratoga. That's a pretty good thing to have on the resume, too. Yeah. It would have been great to end it with that Breeders' Cup victory, but it was a very, very nice year for the connections, Ollie Figgins and Xavier Perez as well. All right, let's move on now. Another one from the Mid-Atlantic region, certainly got some coverage around the country, and will continue to do so if they continue to get fields like this. The Charlestown Classic. $1.5 million. They have certainly made a name for themselves on the racing landscape and helped this year with a field of only 6. But we're going to watch the stretch run. We're going to watch Game On Dude win. Clubhouse Ride will run second. Ron the Greek third. Running fifth, Cash Electronica. Really an outstanding field. Again, only 6, but 30 cents to the dollar. It will be Game On Dude holding off Clubhouse Ride. Charlestown with a big purse, making a name for themselves with the Classic.
Yeah, this goes to what you were talking about earlier too, which is the desire to see some money and some juice around the older horses. And one of the neat things that I think Eric Zimney and the folks at Charlestown have done is they saw this kind of niche out there, that there's a spot in the landscape for a really rich race for older horses, and they've gone ahead and filled it. And it really shows, if you work hard at it and you put the money behind it, people will send their horses to you, even to Charlestown, which is nobody's ideal of a perfect racetrack. But this race has become a really neat race. It's an exciting sort of part of the landscape early in the racing season, and they've had just stellar fields, and here, as you showed, Game On Dude, Ron the Greek, Cash Electronica. I mean, it was a short field, but these are legitimate racehorses here, and it turns out to be a great finish. And this is how Charlestown has begun to make a name for itself. It's for a long time it was kind of where you sent your $3,000 claimer to run out the string, and now it's become a place where they're making some inroads on the simulcast marketplace, and they're doing it by creating a couple of races that you really need to pay attention to, and this is kind of the headliner.
Yeah, absolutely. Frank, we only got just 30 seconds or a minute left, so just quickly, but I wanted to give you a chance. 2013 was a big year for you two. You kicked off the website, theracingbiz.com. We've certainly talked about it a bunch on this show. If folks want to follow Mid-Atlantic Racing, it's a great place to go, but just give us a little recap what 2013 meant to theracingbiz.com.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, Seth. I mean, it's been really fun, and our idea when we started to do this was there's a spot, there's kind of a white space in the media landscape. There's a spot for somebody to really focus on things happening in the Mid-Atlantic and the people in the Mid-Atlantic, and this year has been really fun. I mean, going to all these different big races and different events, and having people say, gee, this is great. I'm really glad somebody's here to do this. It's been really rewarding and really fun to be able to kind of fill that niche.
Yeah, and again, we'll tell people, the racingbiz.com, great coverage of racing in the Mid-Atlantic region, Virginia and Maryland, et cetera, but a lot of fun stuff as well. Great website, theracingbiz.com. Frank, appreciate the visit. Have a happy new year coming up, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Seth, it's always my pleasure. Thanks so much, and happy new year to you and yours.
Thanks, same to you. Frank Vespi from theracingbiz.com. A little earlier, it was Mike Penna from Horse Racing Radio Network. That wraps up Monday's edition of Racing Across America. We're every Monday through Friday from 10 until 11 a.m. A little earlier was the Handicappers Report with Anthony Mormino and I. We took a look at 2 of the 3 thoroughbred tracks that are going this afternoon. Again, there's a lot of harness action, though, as well. But cash some tickets this afternoon, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.